Okay, I'm on page 15 of our packet. So if you can turn to page 15, we're going to be working with word problems. Yes, our favorite. Okay, let's look at this first problem. Jason jumped off a cliff into the ocean in Acapulco while vacationing with some friends. Lucky Jason. His height as a function of time could be modeled by the function h of t is equal to negative 16 times t squared plus 16t plus 480, where t is the time in seconds and h is the height in feet. The first thing that I want to point out, this h of t is not h times t. That's function notation, and we're going to learn that next unit. But you can just think of that, this is h, if that h of t confuses you. So I'm just going to rewrite this as h is equal to negative 16t squared plus 16t plus 480. So I know all my t's mean time, and my h means height. So the first question, how long did it take for Jason to reach his maximum height? Okay, so if I am just like picturing, if I'm going to draw a picture, here is a big cliff, and Jason is going to jump off the cliff. Let's say he can jump pretty high, like woo! So he gets this far, and then he's going to land in the water below. Okay, so how long did it take for Jason to reach his maximum height? This is the max height, right? So in real life, this actually takes the shape of a parabola. That's why we have a quadratic function. We know quadratic functions take the shape of a parabola. And we learned that the maximum point of a parabola is called the vertex. Oops, sorry, I'm going off the page here. Okay, so if my maximum point is the vertex, that means I know the vertex is h comma k. So if I want to find out the vertex, first of all I want h, right? Because it says how long did it take. So I want time, t. So this is like, picture h as y and t as x. So if I want time, that's going to be the h value here, this x coordinate. And I know my formula for the h coordinate, whenever I have standard form, this is in standard form, my h is going to be equal to negative b over 2a. If we don't know this formula yet, we need to memorize it. Negative b over 2a, negative b over 2a, negative b over 2a, negative b over 2a. Okay, you guys get the point. My b value, so a, this is my a value, this is my b value, and this is my c value. So if I'm plugging in here, negative b, it's going to be negative 16 over 2 times, 2 times a negative 16. So I can either multiply 2 times negative 16 and get negative 32, or I can notice that negative 16 over negative 16, those just cross out, and I'm left with 1 over 2. So h is equal to 1/2. We need units here. This is real life. If somebody asks you a question, you don't just say 1/2. How long did it take? It says t, the time is in seconds, so 1/2 is equal to 0.5, so it takes 0.5 seconds for Jason to jump. And that makes sense, right? When you're jumping off a cliff, it's just going to be half a second before you reach your max height, because you're not going to be, unless you're like an Olympic jumper, you're going to jump a little bit up and then you're going to start falling pretty fast. So this would be 0.5 seconds. B, what is the highest point that he reached? Okay, now I'm not talking about t, time. I'm talking about the height. So if I want the height, this is my y coordinate. So k, and I know this is confusing because we have h and h. This is going to be my k value, the y coordinate, because it takes place in the y. So I know I can solve for k by plugging this 0.5 or 1/2 back into t and solve for my h. Whenever you have an x coordinate, you can plug that x coordinate back in and solve for your y. Okay, so that means my highest point, k, is going to be equal to negative 16 times 1/2 squared plus 16 times 1/2. You can leave the 1/2 as a decimal if you'd like. I just like working in fractions better. Whenever you have a square term with a fraction, the square term goes to the numerator and the denominator. So this is equal to negative 16 times 1 squared is just 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. I'm going to write this negative 16 over 1 so I can easily see what I'm doing here. And I'm going to write this 16 over 1 so I can see, because I'm multiplying this now. So when I multiply, my denominators don't need to be the same. I just multiply across. 16 times 1 is 16, and 1 times 2 is 2, plus 480. Okay, now I'm going to take these fractions and multiply them. My denominators don't need to be the same when I multiply, so I just multiply across. Negative 16 times 1 gives me negative 16 over 1 times 4 is 4. Plus 16 over 2, I know 16 divided by 2 is 8. Plus 480. Negative 16 divided by 4, I know is negative 4. So now I can add all these numbers up. Oops. Sorry about that. And negative 4 plus 8 gives me a positive 4. And then 4 plus 480 gives me 484. Don't just leave it like this. This is real life. You don't just answer 484. You have to say what was the highest point, and the height is in feet. So 484 feet. So this is a pretty high cliff. So at his highest point, Jason was 484 feet above the ground. That's a long way to fall. Okay, part C. Jason hit the water after how many seconds? That means he hits the water here, and I want to solve for t. Right? I'm solving for t when he hits the water. So what is my h when he hits the water? Up here, the height was 484 feet. But in the water, that's 0 feet. He's at rock bottom. Or I shouldn't say rock bottom because he's in the ocean, but you know what I mean. Okay, so I'm plugging in 0 for h and solving for t. And whenever I have a quadratic equation equaling to 0, that means I use my quadratic formula. I'm going to repeat that. Super important. Whenever a quadratic equation is equal to 0, you can use the quadratic formula to solve for your solutions. So I know my quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so I'm going to have a negative 16 plus or minus the square root of 16 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 480 all over 2 times negative 16. So we can multiply this out. So if I have 16 times 16. That's going to give me 256. I'm going to have to do this off to the side. Let me get another sheet of paper. Okay. Now I'm going to have a negative number times a negative number, so this is actually going to turn into a positive. And I'm going to have 480 times 16 times 4, and that's going to give me 30,720, and I'm adding that to the 256. So it's going to give me, let's do this first. So I have 2 times negative 16 is negative 32. And the square root of 30,976. Is equal to 176. So now I'm going to have two different answers. I'm going to have a positive and a negative. So I'm going to have negative 16 plus 176 over negative 32, and I'm going to have negative 16 minus 176 over negative 32. So if I have 176 minus 10, so that gives me 166 minus a 6, that's going to give me 160 over negative 32. And here, because I have two negatives, I'm going to add them, and it's going to become a bigger negative. So I'm going to have 192, negative 192. Over negative 32. And if these don't divide evenly, then I know that I'm going to have to reduce my fraction, and I know I can reduce them at least by 2 because both numbers are even. But in this case, 160 divided by negative 32 is going to give me a negative 5. And if I have two negatives divided by each other, then I know my answer is going to be positive. So a negative 192 divided by a negative 32 gives me a positive 6. So now I have to think of this in context of my problem. Negative 5 and 6. It says Jason hit the water after how many seconds? We're not going to have a negative time here. So I know that my answer, my real life answer, is going to be 6 seconds. So Jason is going to fall at a maximum height of 484 feet, and 6 seconds later, he hits the ground.